Welcome to the Partis channel. Today we explain Deuteronomy chapter 18 in a clear and simple way, step by step. In this explainer, we're going to look really closely at the foundation of spiritual leadership and authority, exactly as it was laid out for the ancient Israelites. Think about it. Who actually has the right to speak for God? How are the people supposed to support those who dedicate their entire lives to spiritual service? And crucially, how do you tell the difference between the actual truth and a really dangerous deception? Well, the text gives us some incredibly practical, straightforward answers to all of these questions.
Okay, let's dive into this. Our methodical, step-by-step journey through the chapter is going to follow a logical progression. We'll start with the introduction and context, look at the portions for the Levites, cover the forbidden occult practices, discuss the true prophet, move into clarifications and key ideas, and finally wrap up with some practical lessons and a quick recap.
Section 1. Introduction and Context. Entering Deuteronomy 18.
Before we get into the specific rules, we really need to know exactly where we are in the text. The Israelites are standing right on the border, preparing to enter the land of Canaan. Moses is speaking to them, and he's giving them the exact blueprint for how their society is going to function once they cross over. You've got to remember, they are about to transition from wandering in the desert, where they were miraculously fed by manna every single day, to building a settled agricultural nation. To pull this off successfully, they need a clear, rock-solid system of leadership, worship, and truth. And that is exactly what chapter 18 provides. Everything we're discussing today comes directly from the plain, straightforward meaning of these verses, what's known as the Peshat. We aren't going to look at hidden symbols or deep mystical interpretations today. We're simply going to read the Hebrew text of Deuteronomy chapter 18 and understand the fundamental structures it put in place.
Section 2. Portions for the Levites, providing for spiritual leaders. So, the chapter opens with instructions concerning the tribe of Levi. The Levites were the tribe specifically chosen to maintain the sanctuary, handle the sacrifices, and minister in the name of the Lord. But because they were dedicated to this full-time spiritual work, they had a very unique economic situation that the text addresses right away in verses 1 through 8. According to verses 3 and 4, the people owed specific physical support to the priests when they offered sacrifices and gathered their harvests. If an Israelite sacrificed a bull or a sheep, the priest was given the shoulder, the inner parts, and the jowls. Now, I know sheep jowls or cheeks might not sound like a premium steak to us today, but in the ancient world, this was a highly prized, fatty, and delicious cut of meat. Furthermore, from the agricultural harvest, the people were commanded to give the first fruits of their grain, their new wine, and their olive oil. They even had to give the first fleece from the shearing of their sheep. In a completely agrarian society, meat, produce, and wool were basically your bank account. This system ensured that the spiritual leaders were physically sustained with dignity directly by the community they served.
But why was this mandatory support necessary? Verses 1 and 2 give us the clear answer. It says, the priests, who are Levites, indeed the whole tribe of Levi, are to have no allotment or inheritance with Israel. While the other tribes receive designated territories of land to farm, build on, and pass down to their children, the Levites got absolutely nothing. The text declares, the Lord is their inheritance. It's incredibly vital to understand the vulnerability this created. In an agrarian society, having no land meant you were effectively homeless and entirely at the mercy of the community's faithfulness. Because God chose them to stand and minister always, they simply had no land to plow. They were entirely dependent on the faithful offerings of the community. If the people stopped bringing their offerings, the Levites would literally starve. It was a mutual relationship built on profound trust and provision.
Now, what's really interesting about verses 6 through 8 is how they ensure absolute fairness among the Levites themselves. The text says that if a Levite is living out in a distant country town anywhere in Israel, and he decides to come in all earnestness to the central place the Lord will choose for the sanctuary, well, he has the right to serve there. And not only can he minister just like his fellow Levites who are already stationed there, but he is to share equally in their benefits and portions. This is a brilliant anti-corruption mechanism. It meant a sincere, hardworking country Levite couldn't be shut out by a local religious elite trying to guard their territory. It was an open door for earnest service, guaranteeing equal support for equal work.
Section 3. Forbidden occult practices. Avoiding the nation's ways.
As we move into verses 9 through 14, the tone shifts dramatically. Moses tells the people that when they enter the land, they absolutely must not imitate the detestable ways of the nations currently living there. The text draws a massive, unmistakable line in the sand regarding how humanity is allowed to interact with the unseen spiritual world. The text specifically outlaws a whole list of occult practices. It says, "Let no one be found among you who sacrifices his son or daughter in the fire."
But it goes further, banning anyone who practices divination, sorcery, interpreting omens, witchcraft, casting spells, or consulting ghosts and the dead, which is called necromancy. Now, why would an Israelite even be tempted to do this? Because in the ancient Near East, these weren't just spooky campfire stories. This was the standard, everyday religious technology of the Canaanites. It was how they believed they survived, how they kept the rain falling and the crops growing. But God strictly forbids it because these practices are inherently manipulative. They're illegitimate attempts to force the hands of the gods, to peek into the future, or to gain secret power through dark arts. The text calls all of these things an abomination unto the Lord.
So, the crucial point is found right here in verse 13. In stark contrast to all that dark manipulation, the Israelites are given a completely different standard. Thou shalt be wholehearted with the Lord thy God. Depending on the translation, that Hebrew word tamim can also be translated as blameless or perfect. It means having total integrity and absolute undivided loyalty. You see, you don't need a sorcerer or a magic spell to figure out your life. You need a wholehearted trust in God's stated commands. You don't rely on magic or superstition, you rely on the relationship.
Section 4. The true prophet, divine communication.
Now, this naturally raises a massive question. If the Israelites are strictly forbidden from using diviners, soothsayers, and mediums to find out what to do, how on earth are they supposed to hear from God? Well, verses 15 through 22 provide the authorized channel of communication, the true prophet. To explain why God uses human prophets, Moses reminds the people of a historical event. Back at Horeb, which is also known as Mount Sinai, when the assembly was gathered, God spoke directly from a great fire. Let's be honest, hearing a booming, earth-shaking voice coming out of a massive, terrifying fire is not how anyone wants to get their daily instructions. The experience was so overwhelmingly terrifying that the people genuinely thought they were going to die. They literally begged Moses, "Let me not hear again the voice of the Lord my God, neither let me see this great fire anymore, that I die not." They explicitly asked for a human mediator, and God's response was, "What they say is good." God agreed to raise up a prophet from among their own brothers, someone just like Moses, to speak God's words to them safely. But having a human mediator introduces a totally new danger, right? How do you know if the human is actually speaking for God? Verses 18 through 20 draw a very sharp contrast. The true prophet has God's words placed directly in his mouth and speaks only what is commanded. If a true prophet speaks, the people are absolutely required to listen. But the false prophet is someone who presumes to speak in God's name without being commanded. What does speaking presumptuously mean? It means having the sheer arrogance to put your own words in the Creator's mouth in order to manipulate people. Or even worse, the false prophet speaks in the name of other gods entirely. The text is incredibly severe here. It says that false prophet must be put to death. That is exactly how seriously the text guards the integrity of this divine communication channel.
Moses anticipates the exact question that should be forming in the minds of the people. It's written right there in verse 21. How shall we know the word which the Lord hath not spoken? It's a fantastic narrative hook. If a person stands up in the middle of the town square and loudly claims, "God told me to tell you this," how can the average citizen know if they're telling the truth or if they're a false prophet speaking presumptuously?
Well, verse 22 gives the ultimate, highly practical test. It says, "When a prophet speaketh in the name of the Lord, if the thing follow not, nor come to pass, that is the thing which the Lord hath not spoken." It is an objective test of reality. Think about how revolutionary this was compared to the surrounding nations. The pagans relied on vague omens that could be interpreted 100 different ways by clever, manipulative priests. But God's prophet was held to a strict, verifiable pass-or-fail standard. If someone predicts an event in God's name and it simply does not happen, they are instantly exposed as a fraud. The text says the prophet has spoken presumptuously and the people should not be afraid of him. You don't need to fear their words or respect their authority. The truth is verified by reality itself.
Section 5. Clarifications and key ideas. Understanding the text.
We've just walked step by step through the text. Let's move to see how this builds into three main concepts that hold all these instructions together into a unified theme of divine order. First, we see that legitimate spiritual work requires material support. The Levites don't rely on magic to feed themselves, they rely on the structured generosity of the community. Second, we see an absolute rejection of magic in the occult. God's truth isn't something you hack into using a spell, it is revealed. And third, because we don't use magic and because God's direct, fiery voice is too terrifying to endure, we have the necessity of a verified human mediator, the prophet, who's tested by reality.
This chapter creates a brilliant, profound contrast between the pagan systems of the time and the divine order given to Israel. Think about it for a second. Pagan superstition was entirely rooted in anxiety and manipulation. It was about trying to figure out what the gods wanted through reading animal livers and omens, or trying to bend the gods to your will through dark arts and horrifying sacrifices. Divine prophecy, as outlined here, is the exact opposite. It relies on receiving clear, commanded words from God through a tested, verified human being. It totally replaces anxiety and manipulation with listening and obedience.
Section 6. Practical Lessons and Recap. Applying the Peshat.
As we look at these ancient, straightforward instructions, we can draw some very clear, practical lessons for ourselves. The plain text of Deuteronomy 18 isn't just a history lesson. It lays down principles regarding authority, truth, and community that are absolutely crucial and incredibly relevant today. Step 1. Support your spiritual leaders. Just as the Israelites were commanded to bring their grain and oil so the Levites could minister, communities today thrive when they tangibly support those who dedicate their lives to teaching and service. Step 2. Avoid shortcuts and superstitions. The strict ban on occult practices is a powerful reminder not to look for magical shortcuts in life. When we try to manipulate outcomes through superstitious practices, we are ultimately rejecting our trust in God. Step 3. Seek wholehearted truth. Demand integrity. Test the things you are told. If something claims to be ultimate truth, it must align with reality, just like the test of the true prophet.
And this brilliantly illustrates the complete flow of the chapter we just studied. Let's do a quick review to lock it in. We started by seeing the Levite provisions established, ensuring they had their fair share of the community's harvest since they had no land to call their own. We then saw the strict boundary drawn forbidding occult abominations. We learned the historical context of why God promised to raise up a true prophet to safely speak his words after that terrifying fire at Horeb. And finally, we were given the simple, highly practical test to reveal whether a prophecy is true or false based entirely on whether it actually comes to pass.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a question to really reflect on. Are we wholehearted in our pursuit of truth, or are we secretly looking for manipulative shortcuts in our own lives? True authority doesn't need parlor tricks. It stands firmly on the foundation of truth and reality. Thank you for learning with us. If this helped you understand the chapter better, like, subscribe, and join us for the next chapter.